and welcome to 5 Things to Know, a Tax Talk Today exclusive. Today I'm joined by Darren Guillot. Darren is the IRS Commissioner for Small Business Self-Employed Collections. As the Commissioner, Darren provides executive leadership and direction in the design, deployment, and delivery of an IRS-wide comprehensive tax administration program to meet the needs of America's taxpayers with past-due balances or unfiled returns. These include large and small businesses, tax-exempt, and government entities, self-employed individuals, as well as wage earners. Darren, on behalf of our viewers, it's my pleasure to welcome you back to Tax Talk Today, where IRS representatives and tax industry specialists come together to share their knowledge and experiences working in federal tax law. One consequence for certain unpaid taxes is the revocation or denial of a taxpayer's passport. Earlier this year, the IRS began notifying the State Department of taxpayers who were certified as owing seriously delinquent tax debt and began sending notices CP 508C to affected taxpayers. With this certification, the State Department may then deny a passport application or revoke a current passport. I have a few questions for you about this program. To start with, Darren, can you give us some background on the passport program? How or when did it begin and why?
I'd be happy to, Alan, and thank you to your audience for having us join you today and get these important messages out. This law goes back to 2015, the FAST Act, or Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, that was passed that year. And that law requires the denial, and it authorizes the revocation or limitation of passports that have been certified to the Department of State as having a seriously delinquent tax debt. And it only affects a small number of taxpayers, generally, and it's individuals only, generally individuals with a seriously delinquent tax debt includes those that owe $54,000 or more in tax, penalty, interest, and accruals. $54,000 is this year's number. It's adjusted annually for inflation. And these taxpayers could face a passport revocation or denial by the Department of State. The IRS's role is simply to certify to the Department of State who has a seriously delinquent tax liability. Those consequences are totally under the authority of the Department of State. As of July 2021, there's currently 267,241 individual taxpayers in our accounts receivables with this passport certification. They have an average balance due of over $244,000, and their case has been in our accounts receivables on average for 7.7 years. So these are taxpayers who've had a lengthy opportunity to become compliant before this happens, if it's going to happen, their passport being affected. And they also have significant tax liabilities. Going back even further, why did Congress pass this law? Well, GAO did a study and then a report in March of 2011 entitled "The Potential for Using Passport Issuance to Increase Collection of Unpaid Taxes." And they reported that in 2008, of the 16 million taxpayers that had passports, 244,000 individuals, over 1% of the passport holders, owed over $5.8 billion in past due federal taxes. And at that time, the State Department did not have the authority to restrict the issuance of passports to individuals because they owed federal taxes, and the IRS wasn't permitted to disclose the existence of those liabilities to the Department of State without the taxpayer's consent. And GAO made the recommendation that Congress consider steps to enable state to screen and prevent individuals who owe federal taxes from receiving passports, should Congress have an interest in pursuing such a policy. And so this law was enacted.
That's an interesting way around things. And I like the way that the government decided to work together and coming up with a solution to a serious problem. What is actually included in the definition of a seriously delinquent debt?
Very specific. A seriously delinquent tax debt is an unpaid, legally enforceable federal tax liability of an individual, not a business, an individual, that is assessed and it's greater than $54,000. And again, that's adjusted for inflation. That number will be different next year. And for which they've received a notice of federal tax lien that's been filed, and the taxpayer's right to a collection due process hearing under Section 6320 has either been exhausted already or it's lapsed, or a levy's been issued under Section 6331. And as you asked, yes, there are some debts that are excluded. They're not included here. If the taxpayer's liability is being paid timely under an approved installment agreement or an offer in compromise, it's not included. If their liability is suspended because of a request for, or they have a pending collection due process hearing for a levy under Section 6330 of the code, they're not included. Also, innocent spouse claims. So if they have an innocent spouse election under 6015B or C, or they've made an a request for relief under Section 6015F, they're not included. And further, if they're in a combat zone, the certification is delayed while they are in a combat zone. And we went further than the statutory exclusions. In our discretion, we've also not included taxpayers who are in bankruptcy, if they're the victims of a tax-related identity theft. Also, if we've determined they are currently not collectible based on hardship, if they're in a federally declared disaster zone, and also if they have a pending installment agreement or a pending offer in compromise, they won't be included. And finally, we also won't include debts where the IRS has accepted an adjustment to their account that will fully satisfy the tax debt. And a little bit more about the nature of that $54,000 and above figure. If part of it is due to an assessment made under the IRS's substitute for returned authority, 6020B authority, right? SFR, it's also known as. That's included in the liability. And until the taxpayer files an amended return and it's processed, we include the SFR amount in the calculation of the 54,000 and above figure. So it's really important to avoid delays. File your returns on time.
So if I'm following your answer here, it appears that as long as the taxpayer is working to resolve their issues, this particular issue is a non-issue. Would be a fair statement. Yes. They've got a payment plan. They're trying to do something to rectify that. Great. That's great information. Now, can you tell us a little bit how the process works, the certification process, and what steps are taken to certify a taxpayer as seriously delinquent? At what point should the taxpayer start to worry about the revocation possibilities?
Sure. We began sending the certifications to the Department of State in January 2018, Alan. And when we certify these taxpayers to the Department of State, they may not renew or secure a new passport. Now, the revocation consequence of an existing passport, that's possible, but that is totally up to the Department of State. As of July the 30th of 2021, going back to January 2018, since we began sending those certifications, we have certified to the Department of State over 695,000 individual taxpayers. Now, we did hit the pause button because of the COVID pandemic and the People First initiative, the IRS's sincere effort to not make things worse for taxpayers and to provide some relief. We temporarily suspended many of our collection notices, including the certifications to the Department of State. But we continue to remind taxpayers, now is a great time for you to work with us to set up payment arrangements if you can't pay in full. In fact, we've never made it easier for taxpayers to set up a payment plan than we have over the past year. We just began, though, resuming the passport certifications of seriously delinquent tax liabilities on March the 14th, 2021. Now, a little bit about the process itself, and this is something that your viewers need to be aware of. The IRS will notify the taxpayer of the certification at the time we notify the Department of State. In other words, when we send that certification to the Department of State, we can currently send the taxpayer a notice letting them know that we have. We send this notice only to the taxpayer. These notices are not sent to their powers of attorney. The Department of State then subsequently issues a letter to the taxpayer notifying them that their application will be held open for 90 days, and that's to allow them time to contact us and make arrangements to pay in full or some other payment alternative. If the taxpayer is not decertified after 90 days, the Department of State is then going to notify the taxpayer that their application for their passport is denied. The revocation is not done by the IRS. The IRS doesn't revoke passports. The State Department is the only one who can do that. And we request them to exercise their authority to revoke a passport, but they've got the sole authority to do so. We send the taxpayer a letter, 6152. We give them a heads up of our intent to request the State Department revoke their passport. Those notices were also suspended during the pandemic, and we only recently resumed issuing those letters on July the 15th, 2021. This is going quite a distance for a taxpayer to take this step, and we only do this in limited situations. Some examples are the taxpayer was previously decertified because they made a promise to set up a payment arrangement with us, and then they defaulted. They never made those payments. Another possibility is the taxpayer has offshore activities and offshore interests that could help them resolve their tax liabilities, and they choose not to do so. And any other circumstance where we think that the facts and circumstances indicate the revocation is going to facilitate the payment of the tax. Taxpayers need to call the IRS within 30 days. When they get that letter 6152, it will invite them to call us within 30 days to work with us to try to resolve their tax liability. So it's not necessarily going to happen. So if unfortunately you get one of these letters, don't ignore it. Reach out to us.
Great information. Is it possible for a taxpayer to get the debt certification reversed? And if so, what does that mean for their passport application?
Sure, we notify the Department of State within 30 days that we want to decertify them. So that reversal will happen within 30 days of the taxpayer either meeting one of those statutory exclusions or one of those discretionary exclusions. And if there was an erroneous certification, we jump on that. We will notify the Department of State as soon as is practicable. The FAST Act allows the taxpayer to bring civil action. So the taxpayers do have rights. I want to point that out. They have a right to bring civil action against the United States in either the U.S. tax court or the district court to determine whether the certification was erroneous or the IRS didn't reverse the certification when we were required to do so. We've decertified over 290,000 taxpayers as of July the 30th of 2021, and all the information we have around the program shows it's extremely successful in getting taxpayers to become compliant. So most have, we reach an amenable solution with them. Now, if you have imminent travel plans, and that's defined as in 45 days or less, many taxpayers are looking for an expedited decertification, and we do have a process in place for that. We can expedite the decertification if they can, if they have a pending passport application or a renewal of their passport. This does not apply to revocations. For the expedited reversal, they're going to need to reach out to us and let us know they have travel planned within 45 days, or they live abroad, and they're going to have to give us some information, proof of travel. It could be a flight itinerary, their hotel reservation, a cruise ticket, documents that show the approximate date or the time-sensitive need for a passport. And they're also going to need to share with us a copy of the letter from the Department of State denying their passport application. And again, the State Department has the sole authority to issue, to limit, to deny, or revoke that passport. But when it's expedited, that 30 days, the IRS can generally shorten it by 2 or 3 weeks, 14 to 21 days. Key for the audience to understand, though, once the IRS has decertified, even the expedited decertification, it's the responsibility of the taxpayer to stay in touch with the Department of State and continue working with them on the processing of their passport application.
That's good information. It's actually twofold because the IRS is going to decertify, but it's still up to the Department of State to execute the passport issue. So that's good information. Thank you. Is there anything else about the passport program that you would like the tax practitioner community to be aware of?
It's important for the audience to understand, once we've certified you to the Department of State as having a seriously delinquent tax liability, the Department of State can exercise their authority to revoke your passport at any time. So you need to work with the IRS. We're here to work with you. We don't want to limit your passport. We don't want to affect your travel at all. We certainly don't want taxpayers to have their passport revoked. We just want you to become compliant and go on with your life. However, don't try to guess whether your passport is at risk. I can assure you it is, but we are here to work with you.
Great information, Darren. Thank you so much. You've been, as always, you've been on our shows so many times in the past. We do appreciate that. Really great information. And on behalf of our viewers, I would like to thank you for your years of service with the IRS, particularly as Commissioner for Small Business Self-Employed Collections. Your work in this role is critical to the IRS operations and helps ensure that taxpayers are receiving the most effective service from the IRS and tax preparers. Thanks again for joining us on 5 Things to Know, and we look forward to having you back again in another Tax Talk Today program. You can hear more from Darren and about the IRS collections process in our recent June Tax Talk Today CPE program, available on our website in the self-study archives. Thank you for watching, and as always, it's been great learning with you. Be sure to join us again on an upcoming Tax Talk Today program.